Thank you for being here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Would you please rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up is roll call. Would you please? Let me get this thing going here. Start voting, please. Holly?
All councilors present, with Councilor Stefano previously requesting to be excused, and a quorum has been declared.
Thank you. Next up is the agenda approval. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda, Holly?
There is not.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll move that we approve the agenda as presented and excuse Councilor Stefano.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, start voting, please. Okay. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Next up, we have citizen comment. Alamosa City Council welcomes your comments. Citizens wishing to speak may obtain and complete a speaker card through the city clerk at the start of the meeting. There is a 3-minute time limit, which will be strictly enforced. I have one card, and that is Ruthie Brown. Thank you for being here, Ruthie.
Don't start my time yet. I just want to say, you know, it's finally winter when Dan's not wearing shorts. I'm like, it's getting colder out there tonight. Anyway, here we go. Ruthie Brown, I always say I live at 711 State Avenue, but I can't vote in the county or in the city because I sleep in the county. But a friend of mine asked me the other day if I ever came up with positive ideas instead of coming to city council and complaining. So I'm going to suggest a couple things. I've been to many meetings where city council has donated to someone and then organizations, and then they come back and they say that the $1,000 you spent, we turn around 7 times, and before you turn around, that's $1 bajillion. And I would ask city council to look at that when you put out your bids. I don't know if your bids for local business people is 7 to 10% maybe. Well, using those same figures that you do when you donate, that what if we spent local and we gave a 20% advantage to people in Alamosa? And then that person, that business person, they hire people and they shop here and they pay taxes and they send their kids to school. Using the same formulas, it would cost the city more to begin with, but you'd be walking the walk, you know, that sort of thing. So I'd like to see what the city is spending on office supplies and things like that, and do we walk downtown to our stores and compare what we can get locally, and do we ever ask merchants, what can you get for us locally? Also last year and maybe the year before, there were some chamber networking meetings. I've been to a number of them, and I don't know that I've ever seen a city council member there. I know you guys go to a lot of meetings, I know, but that's part of the job. And I think maybe you'd get a better feel for the business community. You send out water bills every month, and why not get with the chamber and economic development and promote our town? When I hear things that it won't matter if we give our employees $20, they'll still all go out to Walmart, that pisses me off. I could say it upsets me, it angers me, but no, it pisses me off because I work really hard and so do all the other businesses in downtown Alamosa. So maybe if somehow we could get together and send something, it wouldn't cost any, it cost a ream of paper that you could buy at the local office supply. Maybe that would be a start. And when you do your economic development, talk to your business people, not just people who think they know how it should be done. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ruthie. That's the only card I have. Does staff wish to comment on any of Ruthie's? Okay. Thank you.
I have
We'll
a comment, Mayor. I just want to thank you for coming out and sharing your comments, Ruthie. But I just would like to shed a little light on some of the comments you made as well. All of us who up here on council, we participate in some type of board or committee, namely Councilman Johnson and myself. We participate, Councilman Johnson, on the, I guess it's called the marketing board, and I participate on the DRG board. Both of these boards, we gather information and we discuss what we find about economic development with our city manager, Heather, and also Pat and Amanda. And we're constantly trying to find ways to promote our city and to promote economic development throughout our city of Alamosa. So I just wanted to let you know that we are trying to do our best to put our faces and be active in those areas of our community as well. So thank you for your comments, and we'll continue to try to improve in that area as well as we can. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Kun. Anyone else? Move along to ceremonial items. Tonight we are introducing a new employee from the Finance Department. Thank you for being here, Amanda.
Well, it's not very often that we have new employees in our finance department, but we had a opening at the end of the year, and I'm happy to introduce Tiffany Wankura. Tiffany comes to us from Pitkin County. She was in the treasurer's office there. She'd been there since 2005 and worked her way up to be the chief deputy clerk there. She's got a very wide knowledge base. She's fitting in very well in our department. We still have a lot of learning curve to do, but we're excited to have her here, and I'll give her a couple minutes to maybe tell something about herself if she'd like.
Hello. Again, my name's Tiffany Wankura, and I'm just really pleased to be here. I decided to get out of Pitkin County, Aspen, Colorado, to do a whole new life change, settle down, and enjoy life. And I think I picked a great community to come to. I've enjoyed my 3 weeks now with the city, and I look forward to the years to come.
Thank you, Tiffany. Council, we have any comments or questions of Tiffany? Councilor Johnson?
Just like to say welcome, Tiffany. You'll fit right in with the finance people. Big shoes to fill. Javi was a really
Yes.
good guy. Everybody liked him, but you'll do fine. Welcome to our city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. And on behalf of City Council, the entire City Council, welcome to Alamosa. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Next up, Council, we have Consent Calendar A. Consent Calendar allows multiple actions with one motion. Consent Calendar A contains routine items that have been recommended for action by staff or advisory boards. Council may remove a consent calendar item for separate consideration. Tonight, we received December 2014 expenditure report, approved minutes of the regular meeting for January the 7th, 2015, and received the December 2014 monthly reports. Questions or comments on consent calendar A? Council? I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion we approve consent calendar A.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on consent calendar A? Seeing none, start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Next up, we'll move on to regular business brought forward by city staff. Tonight, we have a public hearing on ordinance number 2015 and ordinance authorizing construction of public improvements within the City of Alamosa Special Improvement District 14-1, Carroll Subdivision Addition Number 2, and approving issuance of a preliminary order for the construction of such improvements in Special Improvement District 14-1. Heather? Or
Actually, Mayor, I'll introduce this one. So before you is, for second reading after public hearing, is ordinance 2015-1, which approves the preliminary order that was discussed at the last meeting. So because of the structure of Alamosa's charter with respect to ordinance passage, as it aligns with the statutory requirements for special improvement districts, we had a public hearing on that preliminary order. This is now a public hearing on the ordinance that approves the preliminary order. So the topic is essentially the same as the public hearing that we had last meeting, but relating specifically to second reading of the ordinance approving that preliminary order. If anyone's got any questions, we can certainly go through them, but as you know, we went through the items on the preliminary order at the last meeting as well. And this ordinance then authorizes that preliminary order, which authorizes construction of those particular improvements for the Carroll Subdivision Number 2, and those are being those improvements being street, sidewalk, curb and gutter, lighting, water, and sanitary and storm sewer improvements.
I would just also like to add, based on the public hearing that was held at the last meeting and questions that staff has received, many of the comments related to how the assessments will be placed, which we explained is actually going to be a council decision to come at a later time. Part of the reason for that is when we will have the actual information, that you would have a better idea of what costs need to be assessed and what would happen while making those assessments if you change it from one property owner, how it might change for another. Secondly, I wanted to let you know, as we bid out the design of this project, we will be asking the successful bidder to try to separate as much as possible the different design aspects. There are some that may not be able to be separated, while there might be others. So we will be trying to get as detailed information as possible when it comes to the cost, because that discussion still remains in the future from an assessment perspective.
thank you, Heather. Councilor, before I open the public hearing, do we have any questions of staff? Councilor Johnson.
Heather, how will that impact the pricing of the project when we're asking to be separated out like that?
We're going to make that request after we get the bids in, so we will be able to award it to the lowest bidder and then have a discussion with them on what would they be able to price out separately, the design of the street separate from the water. There are some aspects, such as elevations, that they may not be able to. But until we know who the lowest bidder is and have that conversation with them, we're really not quite sure. So we're working on that.
Councilor Beagle.
I had a question for Eric. You talked about a preliminary order to construct and install streets, sidewalks, curb, gutter, lighting, water, sanitary, and storm sewer improvements. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Heather was pointing something out, so she has something to say, but.
I think a point of clarification is the preliminary order that they're voting on tonight would not include sidewalks for the project. When council initially created the SID, at that point, the creation included sidewalks, but with the vote prior to the bond language, we removed the language of sidewalks.
The only thing relevant to sidewalks anymore, that's correct, is the ADA corners.
So sidewalks, period. Well, this thing should say ADA on the corners on it, because the way it's presented, and if that's the way it was presented to the public, then this has to go back out or something. Because the way I understand it, and I pointed it out to our city manager, and I still read it today where it says, you know, construct and install sidewalks.
Give me a moment, Councilor. I'm trying to open up
Sure.
the ordinance itself.
Okay.
When we sent out the material specs and cost estimate, which broke down the construction costs, On there is the ADA, the mountable curb and gutter, the ADA corners, and the concrete pans. So at the corners, that was included in the description that was mailed legally to the property owners.
Yes, I understand that, City Manager, but this does not say ADA. This says sidewalks.
Which is referring to the initial creation of the SID.
But the average individual out there that reads this is not reading ADA, it's reading sidewalks. And when those sidewalks go out there, you know, I don't want people coming back at us and saying, hey, you passed this, and it stated sidewalks out there, and we didn't get no sidewalks.
So if we look at the preliminary order itself, which is an attachment to the ordinance, I'm not good at operating my desk. Here we go. The ordinance references the preliminary order being attached. And
Is that one of the attachments here, Eric?
it is. I'm trying to open it. You can see if you can get there faster than I can. Okay, Heather's got it. The preliminary order specifically describes the boundaries of the Carroll subdivision, and then it specifically describes the improvements that are going to be installed. And so those include water main, water service connections, fire hydrants, sewer pipe, sewer manholes, sewer service connections, mountable curb and gutter, 6 type 2 ADA corners, concrete drainage pan, unconsolidated excavation, class 5 road base, and asphalt. So there are no sidewalks included within the preliminary order nor within the ordinance itself. But you're reading the sidewalks off the council communication, not the actual document. And
Okay.
that, I drafted that, and that could actually be a carryover. It does relate to the Special Improvement District 14-1, which did talk about sidewalks, but as Heather pointed out, over the course of meetings and public input and what eventually got put to the voters, those were dropped out.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Council. And with that, I will open the public hearing on ordinance number 1-2015, an ordinance authorizing construction of public improvements within the City of Alamosa Special Improvement District 14-1, Carroll Subdivision Addition Number 2, and approving issuance of a preliminary order for the construction of such improvements in Special Improvement District 14-1. Anyone wishing to talk to or visit with council on this ordinance, please come to the podium. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on ordinance number 1-2015 and bring it to council for a decision. Councilor Johnson?
If there's no questions or discussion, I move that we approve ordinance number 1, 2015.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on ordinance number 1-2015? Seeing none, please start voting. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Next up, we have business brought forward by Finance, resolution number 3, 2015, a resolution making supplemental appropriations and authorizing expenditures in excess of amounts budgeted for the City of Alamosa in Ordinance 13, 2014, and known as the first budget amendment. Thank you, Amanda.
This resolution is pretty straightforward. It only contains one item, which is the acceptance of the El Pomar grant for $75,000. That is then the second part of the resolution to be used for economic development.
Thank you, Amanda. Any questions of Amanda? Thank you, Amanda. Council, Councilor Grego?
If there's no further questions, I'll make the motion. We pass resolution number 3, 2015.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on resolution number 3, 2015?
Mayor, just wanted to thank staff, Heather, and I think Randy Wright had a lot to do with this. Little bit of work, quite a bit of work, I'm sure, quite a bit of money to help support economic development, and we appreciate the extra effort of staff and Randy Wright to get this thing pushed through quickly and help us with this project. Thank you, and pass along the thanks to staff.
And I also would like to make a comment, Mayor. I know that there were a lot of different people from the community who had some involvement in this, and I don't know all the names, but I too would like to thank the staff and everyone else who participated in helping this become a reality. So it just shows you what we can do together as a team in this community when we pull together, and I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you. And I will follow up with that as well. There are many people involved in this project, and I also would like to thank staff for the dedication and the time commitment they did in applying for this grant. And so start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Next up on business brought forward by city staff, we have city manager / legal, Heather.
The next item before you is actually a group effort that crossed several departments. We involved Public Works, Parks and Rec, Police, and then the city managers and city attorney's offices. Last summer presented several interesting situations in relation to nuisances and weeds, and also looking at trees that might be blocking the line of sight for vehicles. And as we sat down in a team meeting to take a look at what our nuisance ordinance read, there are several items we identified that probably needed to be changed. Some of it's is what we would consider probably housekeeping, and some of it's more substantial and would be more substantial changes in the ordinance. The item you have before you tonight does not address some of the additional work that we will be bringing forward in regards to a noxious weed plan. That's something that Hines is still developing, and we need to make sure we're compliant with what's at the state level. So that is something that will be coming in the future. What's before you now is essentially trying to address some of those items we faced this summer in order to be more aggressive with the weeds and address some of those issues. You might remember Mr. Cooper appeared at a council meeting concerned about a tree that was blocking the line of sight. That was one of the items that prompted this. One of the others is we had a vacant piece of property with overgrown weeds, and there were some different interpretations on what our enforcement could be in regards to those weeds. So we again met and we reviewed those. The ordinance before you now essentially has the following changes. The first one is that we are making it applicable to all lots within the city. We're eliminating the word that it has to be developed property. I think when we're faced with weed complaints, residents don't care if it's on developed or undeveloped property. If it's within city limits, there's an expectation that it would be taken care of. The other change is we are connecting our definition of noxious weed with that of the state of Colorado. Now, they obviously have a few different lists, an A, B, and C. Ours is connecting it up to the list A, but it does give the Parks Director the authority to add some of those items that are on list B and list C. We also felt that we needed to streamline the citation and appeal process. The ordinance read that someone could appeal it to the city council. We felt for this level of items that appealing it to the city manager was probably more appropriate. We also added an appeals process. When we talked, we decided that we needed to be more aggressive with how we were doing some of the weeds, especially on some of the larger properties. Already in the ordinance, we could give notice abate the problem and charge that property owner for that. That's nothing new. We just were not necessarily using that very often. We were using the route of doing a ticket and it works its way through court. Well, what we've realized is by the time it can work its way through court, we're done with the weed season. So there's some properties that we are probably going to be more aggressive with. Those single residential properties where it's not terribly bad, you know, we might still use the same process of the ticketing. For those that are very egregious and we don't seem to be getting any cooperation, we can go ahead and abate it and get that situation taken care of for the residents and let the rest of the process work itself out. Well, as we discussed being more aggressive, we would hate to have our officer feel that's a noxious weed and we go and cut it down and it turns out maybe it wasn't. So we wanted to make sure that that person could appeal it before we actually got rid of the item, the shrub. So that is why we added that to the process. The other item that is new to the ordinance, and this is directly related to the information Mr. Cooper brought to our attention, is related to trees blocking the line of sight. When we looked at the ordinance, it was clear that property owners already have to maintain trees and shrubs in the right-of-way in regards to they cannot be diseased, they cannot be dying, they cannot be presenting a safety hazard because of a bad limb, that type of thing. What's not in there is anything related to the line of sight. So what we did is some research. We looked at other communities and based, you know, on our experience, it's a fairly common thing to include that as well in the maintenance of the trees. So it was we made the addition for the line of sight, and then we also had it for impeding traffic. So if they're hanging too low, either for the sidewalk, which was at 8 feet, or below 14 feet over the traveled road, that they would need to be maintained. Now, the question that sometimes comes up with this is the city obviously owns a lot of property and sometimes could be one of the offenders when it comes to maintaining that property and not creating a nuisance. Probably within the next 6 months, we are going to look at trying to remove some of the city-owned property that we have no use for, either through giving that to the adjoining property owners or selling it, those types of items. That way we can reduce the amount of property that really, if there is no use for it, for the community, for the city, we can reduce that on the workload that we have for our staff on the property they have to maintain. The other item from an enforcement perspective is we're not necessarily going to be driving around looking for these items. What we would probably do is have staff and our nuisance officers be aware of this when they're out and about. If they see something, they would do their normal process of communicating with the property owner. We would also have, if we've received complaints from residents, to follow up on those items. So essentially that would be the type of enforcement. We're not going to hire anybody to drive around and look for these items. So essentially, when I talked about what's coming up next, it would be the Colorado Noxious Weed Act and becoming compliant with that. But other than that, that would be a summary of what this item is before you.
Thank you, Heather. And I was remiss in not reading this. This was the first reading on ordinance number 2, 2015, an ordinance amending Article 3 of Chapter 14 of the Alamosa Code of Ordinances, Section 14 through 51 through 14 through 55, to make the laws governing weeds, vegetation, trash, and rubbish applicable to all properties, not just developed properties, to add requirements concerning maintenance of trees and shrubbery interfering with vehicle and pedestrian traffic, and to streamline the citation and appeals process. Do we have any questions or comments of staff, council? Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have a question and a comment. First, the comment is I'm glad to see the work on the trees, as I've gotten a lot of phone calls on hazardous trees, and it's a safety issue, so I'm glad the city's addressing that. Continuing with the trees, the diseased trees, will our code enforcement officer know what that looks like or get some training on that?
I was surprised when I met with Amber on the knowledge she does currently have. I also know that if she does have questions, she has resources, probably someone on the tree board or some of those people that she could reach out to determine if it's diseased or not.
Councillor Coleman?
Yes, Heather, being aggressive with this ordinance is important and it's key, and I think it's very important to making sure that our city is kept looking real nice, neat, and clean. But my question is do we have the adequate staff to enforce these changes now that we're including all properties? And I guess my follow-up question would be, will we need additional staff to make sure that we follow up on the enforcement part? Because my main thing that I'm concerned with is I just want to make sure if we're going to pass an ordinance that we're going to follow through and everyone knows that we're going to follow through, but not only that we're going to follow through, but we're going to be fair with the follow through as well. And training, I think, is going to be important for staff as well, so they'll know what's the difference between a plant or a weed, so that whatever we're trying to make sure that we mediate is adequate for whatever we do. That's okay?
So that's a very good question. Ironically, to us, it's almost simply housekeeping, taking out the developed, because from a call perspective, residents were not differentiating on if it was developed or vacant. We were getting the calls no matter what and having to follow up on it no matter what. So the workload in regards to removing the developed definition, it will not change. In fact, it will actually be somewhat easier because we were having to walk off what 50 feet was on that property and those types of things. So it will actually make it much easier from an enforcement perspective. In regards to the trees, it's something like with many of our nuisances, they're out, they're about, they know what to look for, and this will be added to that list. Is it something where they're covering the entire community? No, and that's where we usually rely on the complaints as well. While sitting in the meeting from an education perspective, again, I was very impressed that Amber was well-versed on the state statute for noxious weeds, and she seemed to clearly know where to go if she needed additional information. So I think our staff's been pretty well-versed in those areas. They definitely knew a lot more about weeds than I did.
That's good to know. Thank you.
The state director of the noxious weed program is more than happy to come down and meet with us as well. He said, "Oh boy, we just love asking us questions, and we're happy to come down and talk with you." So there are state resources as well there.
Councillor Griego?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to thank you, Heather, for the enforcement is going to be across the board. Everybody's going to, including ourselves, we're going to enforce ourselves. In the past, I think there's been some problems there with as far as who gets the ticket and who doesn't get the ticket. And secondly, I was kind of confused because I thought the process was that if you don't cut your weeds, the weed enforcement person comes and gives you a ticket, tells you to cut them within a period of time, and if you don't, then you go in front of our municipal judge.
So there's a couple of different processes we could have used, and this is not anything we're changing in the ordinance, but we're changing in actually how we do it. So that is the normal process of how it would be done. I think probably for some of them there'd be a warning, and I know from talking to Amber, she would work with the individual if they had a legitimate reason on why they might have needed a few extra days. She would usually work with them. If they were unable to do it for physical reasons, she'd connect them with resources to be able to help. So she's been doing a really good job as far as if it can get taken care of before having to go through court. That's what she was trying to do, is get the issue resolved. The part that was in the ordinance that we just weren't being aggressive on is if it's not, we can go out there and give notice that they need to abate it, and if they don't, not only will the regular ticket process occur, that time frame we can also go in afterwards and abate it ourselves and then place the cost on them. So again, that's not something we're going to do for every single property because, one, it takes time from a staff perspective to do the proper paperwork and all of that and follow up on it. But also, just from a customer service perspective, we'd like to save that more aggressive for those areas that either repeat very, very bad condition, or we just don't feel like they're going to do something, and it's creating an extreme hazard. So we're going to save the more aggressive for those types of things, but it's been an option this entire time, and they can run concurrently. So those would still get the charge. We've already fixed the property, but the judge can still assess a penalty for being in violation.
But in reading this ordinance, it continues to say that it goes to the city manager.
If they want to appeal the abatement. Correct?
Well, not the, so the process as far as issuing you a ticket, that still continues?
To court,
Well,
yes.
that's where my confusion was, because it kept on reading, it'll go to the city manager. I thought it would go to the judge instead of the city manager.
On the abatement, if they
On
wanted
just
to
the
appeal
abatement itself.
like the charge, if they don't think the charge is accurate, if
Oh,
they,
okay.
those types of things for the
Okay.
abatement work. The ticket itself for the violation still goes through municipal
Same
court.
process. Okay, thank you very much.
Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. Thing I was excited a bit about in this ordinance that we're addressing, for years, council's talked about the slivers of property that we own. The city owns a huge amount of slivers, and when we're talking about giving away, I don't want the public to panic that we're handing out free property. What we're talking about is slivers of property between an alley or something like that, that it's not even close to being big enough for a lot, and why the city has kept a hold of those properties. We've talked about it time and time again, and in most of those cases, the property owner next to it is keeping that property up and cutting the weeds, but sometimes they're not so happy about doing that for us. And so they leave them. So this will take care of that. It'll give the property owner the property that is really what they've been maintaining. So I just don't want the feeling that we're giving away huge amounts of properties. These are a lot of them are slivers or small parts of properties that we've talked about giving away or trying to liquidate through the city process.
Councilman Johnson, I think the proper term is vacating. We can vacate these properties, because like you say, it's either, it only benefits this property owner, or it's a dead end, or it's
Correct.
something. And for the longest time, there has been property owners that have maintained this on their own through the years, and I could list you about 4 or 5 of them. And I'm glad that we're finally getting back on track, because we have been doing stuff like that. You know, in the past, we did some stuff when, for some reason, it kind of got away from us, and now it's coming back. So we can repeat that, so.
To be clear for the public, to vacate property, that will be coming back before council for an official action on that. But I wanted to make sure, as we're talking about being more aggressive in our enforcement, I'd be negligent not to mention the city's property and what our plan is to do with that.
Correct, and I agree with Charlie. I think we need to be strong on ourselves in addition to on our, other thing I wanted to touch on was this summer was probably more problematic than any other summer we've had on weed and weed abatement. So this is a good timing for this. Let's get this handled through the winter time, and we'll be aggressive early. Our citizens will know we'll be aggressive, and it'll help things. And then on the tree end of it, typically the tree board has those trees that don't look healthy. They have them, typically a tree goes through cycles, a couple years before they're ready to condemn it, and they do a really good job of keeping their eye and monitoring those type of things. If they get diseased, there's always processes to try to revive the tree, and they do a really good job. And when a disease comes into our area, they get out public service bulletins, and Marilyn does an article in the newspaper, and she's really conscious about that stuff. So I think our enforcement officer working with the tree board and our ordinance, I think it works out very well. Thank you.
Councilor? I did want to ask a couple of questions of staff. Obviously, do we have an inventory of the properties involved, whether they are going to be vacated or sold?
This is actually, that's something that's been on Pat's radar for a while. So they do have a map that indicates what properties are owned by the city, and there's already been some initial thought put towards which ones probably make sense to try to vacate, which ones make sense to try to sell, and which ones make sense to keep. So it's some rough thought there, but the map does exist as far as the city-owned properties.
Okay. And we obviously have a system in which that we can use to both vacate as well as sell properties?
We have processes in place that we would follow for those, yes.
Thank you. I do like the issue of the abatement, and I think this ordinance adds a lot more fairness. I think fairness is essential, in dealing with citizens, and I think the appeals process adds a layer of relief for our folks out in the community, and so I'm impressed with what staff has done with this. Council, is there any further discussion on ordinance number 2015? Councilor Vigil?
Mr. Mayor, again, I don't know if I said this earlier, but I'd like to thank staff for the work on this. I think it'll be great for us going into the summertime, as Councilor Johnson mentioned.
Councilor Griego?
If there's no further questions, I'll go ahead and make the motion that we pass on first reading ordinance number 2, 2015, and set it for a public hearing on, is it February the 3rd? Is that our next?
February 4th.
4th, I'm sorry, at 7 o'clock or soon thereafter.
I'll second that motion.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on ordinance number 2, 2015? Seeing none, start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Next, we have an update on employee appreciation items.
Thank
Heather?
you, Mayor. There's been a lot of discussion regarding this item, and rather than quietly close it out and move forward with something, I felt it was appropriate to discuss it at a council meeting. While it doesn't require a council vote, I think it's just appropriate for everyone to know what direction we might be heading in. Centrally, based on the comments that I received from City Council at the last council meeting, I think probably what's most appropriate is to maintain some part of our budget to show appreciation to employees. Obviously, I do not recommend handling cash. We'd like to avoid handling cash as much as possible. Using the gift card had some complications. So my recommendation is in November, either the first or second paycheck, we would do a $25 code that would show up in their paycheck. I'd recommend going up to $25 because obviously going through payroll, it will get taxed, and that way they'll be essentially the same as what they've been the previous years at $20. Again, it does not require a vote. It's already in the budget. It's being used for the same item of what was approved in the budget. So unless there's any concerns, that would be the direction we would move in on a city level.
Thank you, Heather. Council, do we have any comments or questions of Heather specific to this item?
I have a comment. I appreciate you doing that, Heather, because it's just such a small token of appreciation, Turkey. You wouldn't believe how people really appreciate it. And like I've said before, it's those people that really run this city, and it's a very small token of appreciation.
Thank you. Councilor Coleman.
Yeah, Heather, I would like to thank you for doing that as well. There was a study done not too long ago that stated that one of the top reasons people stay employed where they work is because they feel appreciated. So I think anytime that we can do something to let our staff know that we appreciate them, it's moving us in the right direction. So thank you. And I appreciate all of you.
Thank you, Heather, for doing that. I think it's important for us to maintain and increase the amount to our employees. I mean, there's no real way we can say thank you. It's a very small token, and $25 can go a long way, especially if you've got a young family or you're just wanting to buy that extra gift for somebody or that kind of thing. So we appreciate our employees. We wish we could do a lot more for them. And we appreciate what how staff has handled this. So thank you for that. Next up is the funding for the Pink Elephant Project. Heather?
Well, this item is obviously connected to the previous agenda item with the budget increase of $75,000. Given the successful grant for El Pomar and the community pulling together for that, I would recommend to council that you authorize us to use the $75,000 for the Pink Elephant Project. In working with ACID and what their needs are as they close this project out with the demolition, I think their request is for us to hold on to the $75,000 until the demolition is complete to make sure that there's not any costs that exceed the grant funding that they have. Once that is complete, then we would like to move forward with applying either the 75 or what remains of the 75 towards the financing they had to do to purchase the Sick and Twisted. Either way, the full $75,000 would be going towards the Pink Elephant Project.
Thank you, Heather. Councilor Griego?
That you know I was going to bring up.
I saw you reaching.
At this time, I just want to echo the other councilors, what they've said as far as this project. It's been a project that has taken a while. We've been at it for a lot of years on this project, and it's something that I think eventually once something happens out there where we finally do something, you're going to see like a chain reaction of other areas there that will participate in maybe revitalizing our downtown area. I also did have a question, and I read it on the paper where I guess the county was still having some decisions on as far as what their participation was, and so I don't know where that stands at, Heather.
I was not present at the meeting that was reported on. What I do know is that the roles of who is going to be doing what are fairly set. The meeting I did attend with ACID and the county was to work out those final details. The county has committed to transporting the materials to the landfill. As they're looking at that, I think they're just trying to work out the final details. Obviously, driving to the landfill, there's a fuel cost, and they're trying to, I think, explore ways that they can keep that at a minimum. And then they are looking at ways to get the equipment that would do the job best, and that's working with some of the other partners on the project. So again, I was not at the commissioners meeting that was reported on. I can only speak on the meeting that we were at. I think if you look at the big picture, the roles and the commitment are essentially there. It's just working out the details of how they're going to meet those different commitments.
Councilor Johnson?
If there's no further comments or questions.
I've got a question. Are we still on schedule to begin that demolition first week in February, or how are we moving with our permits with CDOT?
I think some of the permits are moving well in regards to the city's permit and working with the utilities. I think the CDOT is proving to be more complicated than what was anticipated. Some requests are being made maybe that are a little different and unanticipated, but I know Randy is working with the resources he has, and from a staff perspective, we're trying to help him as appropriate through the process. So it still remains to be seen how quickly the CDOT process is going to go. I haven't given up hope yet, but there is a chance it's going to start sliding a little bit in regards to the time frame.
Councilor Johnson?
Okay, if there's no other further discussion, I move that council authorizes an additional $75,000 for the Pink Elephant Project.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the funding of the Pink Elephant Project? Seeing none, start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Next up are committee reports. Who has a committee report? Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a report from the Alamosa School Board. Some highlights from the meeting. They're working on their budget for the upcoming year. Maroon Pride, which is their athletic booster club, gave an update, just stressing people to go to the games and show up and cheer loud and that type of stuff. Isabella Griffin, a student, won a national award for the Be a Bully, Not a Bully. Be a Buddy, Not a Bully award, excuse me. And that's it. Thank you.
And thank you for attending those school board meetings, Councilor Vihil. Councilor Gillespie.
Yes, I attended the golf board meeting last Thursday. One of the items was the election of officers. The president elected was Ron DeSautel, who served last year also. Vice President Stephen Atencio, Treasurer Joel Booth Medina, and Secretary Paul Roberts. The club has seen a very good response to the early membership savings for its members. Members saved the 5% increase that will take effect at the end of January by paying now. The club is collecting for the golf cart shed rentals, which is due by the end of the month. This is approximately $40,000, so that will come in very handy. Unfortunately, this is a slow time of the year for the restaurant, and the money is going out as quickly as it's coming in. The restaurant continues to have a good lunch attendance, but the dinner menu attendance has declined since the first of the year. The Cattails Grill is beginning to take reservations for their special Valentine's dinner, so sign up as soon as you can. And the board, I believe, met last night to finish up the budget for this year. I have not heard anything as to how that came out. That's all I have.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the Alamosa County Tourism Development Board and Local Marketing District Board on January 8th. Little change up in the board. Scott Graber has resigned from the board, and Terry Smith, his term was up and didn't renew his term. So they're looking for 2 new members. The county fills those chairs. They've already put out ads, and I think they've done the interviews, or very shortly. They had 6 people apply. They're going to fill the 2 positions. Should get word on that at the meeting next month if it doesn't come out sooner. Also had a discussion with Lee Connor. He's with the group of Engine 169. They had a good talk with him about moving forward or potential with Engine 169. Also had the opportunity to meet Mary DeMitto. I hope I said that right. She's the lady from Taos that is opening the furniture store downtown in the near future. Name of the place is Lifestyle Mattress and Furniture. She is looking at a May 1st opening with a May 16th grand opening. That's her projected times, so hopefully it's going to fall in there. Very nice lady. I was happy to meet her, and she did sign a 7-year lease with that building, so she is anticipating being in our community and being a member of our community. And that is it. Thank you.
Very good. Councilor Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor. My report is from the San Luis Valley Development Resource Group. The Governor's Office of Economic Development Blueprint Roundtable discussion will be Monday, January the 26th at noon at the Alamosa County Commissioners Chambers. So I would like to invite you all to come out to that and attend that. Alamosa will be gaining a new business in a couple of weeks. Fit Republic will be opening soon thanks to gap financing provided by the San Luis Valley Development Resource Group Business Loan Fund. They plan on having a grand opening on February the 7th, and they will be located next to the Workforce Center on State Avenue. Also, donors to the Enterprise Zone projects gave over $1.4 million in cash to 18 Enterprise Zone projects in 2014. And I have a note here from the SLV-DRG, and they mentioned that the Alamosa Senior Center benefited by receiving $8,820. That's what I have, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Vihil.
Mr. Coleman, I had a question for you. What is Fit Republic?
That's a good question. Looks like what they do is they carry fitness and health supplements and gears and vitamins and things like that. So that's what the notes say right here, Councilman Vigil. Thank you.
Councilor Griego.
I had a couple of reports, and I don't know if I'll probably stick them here under committee reports, even though they're not part of our committee reports. But we met, myself, the mayor, and our city manager. We attended a Veterans Coalition of the San Luis Valley, and it was pretty well attended by a bunch of veterans. They had people that came down from Colorado Serves, people from Welcome Home Montrose, United Veterans Committee, the Veterans Administration Patient Advocate that was there to answer questions for veterans if they had problems with either their paperwork, their medical, or whatever. It was, like I said, it was pretty well attended. We got a presentation from Welcome Home Montrose. What they've done is they've kind of put their whole community together to help veterans, and they went through a slide presentation where they were able to tell us, kind of give us a little direction on if we want to do something like that. They've even publicized their own little paper, and then I brought some stuff here that, you know, some reading stuff, and the mayor wanted me to also mention on this on the Patients Advocate Program, if veterans had problems. The numbers to call here, and I hope this is correct, in Colorado Springs, it's 719-227-4074, and in Pueblo, it's 719-584-5078. So it was a pretty good program, and I don't know if you have anything else to add there, Mayor, on that.
Charlie, I just want to thank you for being there, and Heather as well. There's much information that veterans need to have. I know the Veterans Organization has been going through some hard times, especially up in the Denver area with the hospital that they're trying to build is now on hold. I guess they've had financial problems as well as design problems. So that has really put a damper on a lot of the services that should have already been available for a lot of our veterans. But the advocacy program, especially here in the rural areas of Colorado, can be taken advantage of, especially if veterans have issues with appointments or prescriptions or any problems at all, and they don't seem to be finding a solution. They need to call the advocacy group, and they will take care of them. So thank you very much for attending that, Charlie and Heather. Appreciate that.
On the second one, Mayor, I sit on the Rio Grande Interbasin Roundtable, and we had a meeting here on the 13th, and they met to reappoint the officers, members and their representations. They proposed changes on their bylaws. We had Craig Cotton, a representative from the Colorado Division of Water Resources, give us a small presentation on the snowpack and the water contents. Steve gave us an update on the sub-districts. I brought some stuff here that, you know, and we should probably, if not create a reading file, something that the rest of the council can maybe read some of this stuff. I brought a draft copy of the Colorado water plan that was presented to the governor. And this stuff like that, we could probably put it in some kind of a file, so if anybody really wants to you know, update themselves or just keep on up with what's going on. Also, I need somebody to almost like a alternate when I can't go. My friend Rusty was one, and now his new position, it's hard for him to get away, so I need somebody as an alternate, whereas if I can't attend, somebody could attend those roundtables. And they meet on the second Tuesday of the month, and that's from 2 to 5 o'clock. And what they've done in the past, they usually meet over here at the Colorado Water Conservancy building here on 4th Street. And then sometimes they travel to other counties in meeting that, so I don't know who would be available to, and even if it would be nice to have somebody else come along, and get an education of, that's something that they're really trying to impress on everybody, is to get the word out of the problems we're having with our water and how it's going, and these rules, they're still taking bets, Eric, on when they're supposed to come out on this, and so they're saying another 6 months, but it might take 2 years, who knows, but that, I just thought I'd put that out, and I'll leave this in some kind of reading file so somebody can look at it and whatever, so, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Charlie. Is anybody on council willing to be the alternate for that board at this point in time? Why don't we think about it? And
Don't all pull up your hands.
Yeah. Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it. And we appreciate you being on that. Anyway.
I know it takes time because it is from 2 to 5 o'clock, and it's hard to get away from the positions and stuff, so.
I'll take a look at my schedule, Charlie, and see if I can fit that in. Councilor Coleman.
Councilman.
I'm sorry, Councilor Johnson.
I will say those are real interesting meetings. I attended a few with Charlie and a few when he couldn't go. And, if things work out, I think my schedule will free up in about a year, but so a little buffer time. But, anyway, yeah, those are real interesting meetings, and I think if any counselor or all of them can go at one time or another, just to sit in and listen to some of that, it's real interesting stuff, and it's probably stuff that all of us should be keeping a handle on. Thanks for letting me go there or inviting me to some of that stuff too, Charlie.
Councilor Coleman.
Councilman Grego, thank you for sharing with us how many hours you spend in those meetings. You said it's from 2 to what again?
5 o'clock.
So it's about 3-hour meeting on average. You can put me down temporarily, and I'll try to make it, but I may not be able to stay the full 3 hours because of my current workload, but whenever possible, I may be able to fill in if you're running short, okay?
Usually the majority of the stuff is presented within the first. Usually the majority of the stuff is presented the first couple hours or so. Sometimes it drags out to about 5 o'clock, but mostly. So I appreciate it, Councilman Cole.
Councilor Coleman, I appreciate that, and I'm going to make it a point to maybe attend a meeting or two. I didn't realize that. Well, maybe I can just get away. Let's put it that way. I know we're all busy, but every once in a while we can get a little bit more involved with the water issues that we're kind of looking at. Are there any other committee reports? Seeing none, we'll move on to staff announcements. Heather?
We do have a few staff announcements. Pat will have some here in a minute. At your seating, we placed a copy of the annual report. This is something that we've done for a while now. We will have hard copies at the library here at City Hall and also at the Recreation Center. We will also put a notice out on Facebook. We will email it out on our listserv, and it will be linked to our webpage. So if anybody wants a copy, we do have them, and they are out. It's been a busy year. Staff has been working on a lot of changes. I think sometimes when you get changes in management, and we've definitely had that this past year, you get new ideas and you get some new directions. So it's been a really exciting year, and it's been a great team to work with. I also want to make sure that you guys take a look at the HR section, and the reason I just wanted to point that out is it's a need that we identified and we put some funds towards in order to create that HR risk manager. And in 6 months' time, you'll be able to get a feel how much of an impact that position's having on the organization. It's an area you don't usually see very much as council on the HR side, but it is something that I personally feel is very much worth the investment. So wanted to make sure your attention was drawn to that. Wanted to make council aware of a committee that we have working, and we met for the first time this week. It's a committee comprised of some hockey players and people involved with the ice rink, and then Hines, Andy, and myself. We also have Paul Dwordy, who kind of represents both the ice hockey side of it, but then also the recreation board. The reason we formed this small committee is I think the concept of having a different ice rink or making improvements has been around for a while, but hasn't really received formal attention. And for it to make its way to City Council, I wanted it to have some definition, some meat for you to even know what you're evaluating, to know if you're in favor of something or not. So that's the purpose of this committee, is to essentially put a definition to what a proposal might look like, run it through the recreation board, see if there's any changes from there, and then bring it before City Council. Looking at the timeline that we created, we may want to do a work session in the March-April timeframe. We need to make sure that if this is something council would want us to do, that we're not missing any deadlines for any grants, because those would be critical items. So just as a heads up, we do have a small committee working on that, and you'll see something in the next few months on it. Wanted to make sure everyone is reminded that next weekend, January 30th and 31st, is the Alamosa Ice Fest. For any parents out there, be warned that the theme is Frozen, so if you manage to get that song out of your house, it might come back. Also wanted to make everyone aware that if they did not know already, our city clerk, Christy, will be moving to the sheriff's office at the end of the month. That placed council in the situation of where you are conducting a process. We did get the advertisement out, and the closing is February 13th. Following that, it'll probably take a few weeks to go through the applications, kind of see what process you want to do, narrow it down to some finalists, and then following that, potentially another few weeks to actually do the process. So in filling that position, we are probably looking at the March timeframe for that. In the meantime, with Christy being gone, council decided to ask Ms. Sharon if she would be willing to fill in as the interim, and she has graciously agreed to do that. So beginning in February, Sharon will be the interim city clerk, and she has been shadowing Christy and attending meetings, and she's being copied on emails and all of that. So hopefully the transition will be smooth and there won't be too many bumps. And last, I think, Pat, I'm ready for you if you want to come up. I just got one quick thing. Attending the veterans meeting and the discussion that they presented related to Montrose, I especially took note of how they're partnering with their local government, and plan to look into that more to see if there's things we could be doing as a government to aid in that process for veterans. So there was a lot of good information, good links to find additional information, and it was a very valuable meeting.
Pat, before you, Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor. Heather, a quick question for you for the Ice Fest next week. I know that they added the Rio Frio, the 5K run.
Correct.
With the warm weather we've had, is it safe to run on the Rio?
Pat has assured me as of today that we have more ice than the last time they cut into it a week or two ago, and that I think they need at least a minimum of 4, and they're up to how much now?
Most recommendations call for 4 inches, and in many places on the river, we're at right at 10.
Thank you.
Between 9 and 10.
Thank you, Pat.
Just a quick update. I'm sure you guys remember November 17th, a teenager was struck by a vehicle and flown to Children's Hospital in Denver at the intersection of Washington Avenue and Highway 160. When you guys became aware of this, and after public concern, you've directed us to follow up with CDOT to discuss some options and try to conceptualize alternatives that may help the problems we have out there. Myself, Officer Mestis, and Councilor Johnson met with CDOT on site, and we talked about several things. We talked about perceived problems. We talked about requirements for an official pedestrian crossing on a state highway. They quote the number of 22 crossings per hour. That may be hard for us to meet, depending on how they define location. We'll explore that a little bit, see if we can't stretch that distance out a little. CDOT would like to investigate a 10-year plan for crossings on the highway as the city grows to the west. They have suggested a pedestrian study be conducted by an outside party, an outside engineer, essentially. They are considering helping us pay for that. That will give them the information they need. They've also said that we could do some preliminary counts with city employees to try to identify the concentrated crossing areas and how many people are actually crossing. I was hoping to get at least a commitment out of them for a couple of heavy pedestrian use signs throughout that corridor. I was unable to get that commitment. They want some numbers. They want some study done before they do that. But to move forward, we will maintain communications with CDOT, make sure it kind of stays towards the top of their heap, and we will coordinate an informal count of the crossings with city staff. We'll stage them out there, and we'll try to get an idea of what we got going on, and I'll give you an update occasionally just to keep you guys in the loop on this.
A quick comment, Pat. I really appreciate you doing that. This is not the first time this has come up. You know, we had some of our residents in that area that came to council and gave a presentation of how hard it is to cross that highway and how many near misses until you finally, like you said, finally somebody did. Something had to happen. And it kind of like disturbs me that CDOT wouldn't want to do something, you know. They're kind of throwing it back on us to give them some numbers, and I hope that we pursue that, because there is a large, there's a lot of young college students that have moved into the Washington Edition area that now, because it's so close in proximity to the college, and they cross. If you go by there, you could pretty much see people crossing or attempting to cross that highway, and people are rushing. Once they go around that bend right there by Colorado Realty, that's what, 40, 45?
Right.
You know, and then they go 40, 45, you know. So I appreciate anything you can do and see if we can get them whatever numbers they need.
Yeah, we will continue to work with them. One of the things that we talked about was possibly building a fence on the south side of the railroad tracks to funnel people to one location, so they're not just crossing the tracks at wherever's convenient for them, but to try to get everybody to come to the same place. So, thank you.
Real quick, Pat.
Councilor Johnson?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Real quick, thanks for attending that meeting. Until I joined you, I didn't understand how painful some of those meetings can be with some people, but you did a really good job presenting the city's viewpoint. A lot of the stuff you talked about, Charlie, Pat had all the information. He talked about the college students and the different options. It kind of got to play ball with them on this project. It's their highway, but Pat and the police department both were there and represented the city really well, and I do appreciate that. And pass the appreciation on to Sam. He did a really good job. It's just some of those meetings get painful, and thanks for doing that.
No problem.
Councilor Vihil?
Thank you, Mayor. Pat, I was wondering if you have been able to go and check out 3rd Street and West. I'd mentioned it last meeting about how it's kind of dangerous, how cars have to pull out just to see past parked cars.
Yeah, we have a lot of intersections with that problem, and I've talked with Heather about some potential ways to take care of those, and we'll probably be coming to you in the future at some point with some ideas.
Thanks, Pat.
One more quick update. I've been in contact with the Division of Wildlife. We didn't want to start a bunch of hype about the fishing out at the pond until we knew until we knew everything was going to work. They put 200 catchable trout in there last fall, and before ice out, we didn't see any evidence of a fish kill. So in talking to them now, they said as far as they were concerned, as soon as the ice is off, the fish trucks are rolling. So, and I've put a couple of interested organizations together, and it's in the very preliminary stages, but it looks like we're going to have a big organized Cub Scout fishing event out there in the spring. So at the golf course pond where we pump Blanca Vista Park.
Thank you, Pat. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll go on to council comment. Councilor Coleman.
Yeah, my comment is to Hines and his team. The past couple of weekends, I've had an opportunity to go out to the ice rink, and I was really impressed with the amount of people that have been going out there and visiting the ice rink from the community, as well as seeing our young people participate in different hockey events. And Heather, I'm glad that there's a committee working on the ice rink and finding ways to where we can improve that. I really am. Make sure that we allow for heaters, because it's quite cold out there. But overall, I'm really impressed with it, and the scoreboard is awesome up there. So I just want you all to know that the community appreciates it. A lot of people came up to me and they wanted to thank the city as a whole for their participation in what's going on out there, and just keep up the great work. Good job.
Councilor Gillespie.
Yes, I'd like to thank Christy Doherty for her 22 years of service to the city of Alamosa. She served in the police department and as city clerk, and has done an excellent job. So we wish her the best going to the sheriff's department, and thank you.
Councilor Diego.
I had a couple, I want to echo that too, Christy. I thought maybe you had come up here and say goodbye or something, or give a presentation, but I appreciate what you've done for us with the city, and we'll continue working with you also, and all that. I had a couple other things. I need to be excused myself on February the 4th. I won't be here on that.
Okay.
And then I wanted to really, this was kind of just given to us, but this report is, boy, there's a lot of hard work that went onto this report. If you look at it and you read it, I want to just thank the staff of all the hard work they did to put this thing together. And you said there's going to be copies in the library, and are we going to have it online and all that? Well, I hope people read this, because sometimes people think that we don't do nothing down here. You know, so if you really go in here and see exactly what we're doing, I mean, staff, this is quite concise. It is really great. I want to thank everybody. Thank you.
Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor. Going along with Councilman Grego, this is awesome. Can we put this on our social media outlets?
So yes, we're going to link it on the website, and then that link with the right wording that fits the social media, we're going to tweet it, we're going to put it on Facebook, all of that stuff as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Councilor Johnson.
Echo Greg and Charlie. Thank you, Christy, for the 22 years. I hate to lose you, but I'm glad you're moving up. And Sharon, thanks for taking that position. It's a lot of hard work, and I'm happy you stepped in that position. Keep us going in the right direction. On a personal note, I've had discussion with, I think, all of council, some of staff. You'll notice there's a sign in my yard, selling my house. When and if it does sell, so I don't want to get too pushed forward, I'll look for property that fits my needs, but I'm not moving out of the city. And as long as my employment stays solid, I plan on staying in the city. So thank you.
Councilor Coleman.
And I just also would like to thank Christy for her service here, and you did a great job while you were here, and we all wish you much success in your future endeavors. Best wishes to you. And thank you, Sharon, too, for stepping up and stepping in.
Christy, I don't know what to say, except you will probably be very happy where you're at, or where you're going anyway. We've appreciated everything you've done for council and working with staff here at the City of Alamosa, and your years of dedication to the city are, you know, it's just one of those things where people sometimes don't realize 22 years, that's a lot of time to give to an organization. Most people don't stay very long, but we hope a lot of our employees stay with us for a good length of time. So thank you for that. And Sharon, thank you for stepping up. All our employees, look at old Hines back there. He's got a private conversation going. Thank you, Hines, for what you're doing out there at the skating rink. I'll tell you what, it's wonderful. And Jim, everybody, thank you so much. I did want to make a small statement specific to the Pink Elephant Project. There have been many people that have contributed to that, and our county commissioners. I know that there's been some static in the paper specific to that, but we really need to acknowledge the commissioners and the contributions that they're going to make to this project, and so we thank them in any way we can for helping out there. And with the price of fuel going down, hopefully it won't be such a burden for them. Anyway, if that's all, I will adjourn this meeting. Meeting adjourned.